miracle he needed. This was not a miracle that had to do with money and houses and land. This was a miracle that had to do with his need to be lifted out of his depression. Most of us know at least discouragement. Discouragement typically is related to a loss of something. You're discouraged because you lost your job. You're discouraged because you lost your health. You're discouraged because the bills have climbed up and you've lost your financial freedom. That brings about discouragement where things are not going well and you're sort of downcast. Right now, you're living under a fog on an overcast sky. But when discouragement continues and elongates itself, discouragement devolves into depression. Depression is discouragement on steroids. It's discouragement that now has produced an ongoing level of gloom, an ongoing level of emotional pain. And when discouragement becomes depression, depression unresolved becomes despair. And when depression becomes despair, that ongoing discouragement that has led to depression, which now results in despair, produces a sense of hopelessness. You see no way out. You see that there's going to be no exit sign. There's no way to get around this thing. There's no way to beat this thing. It will not go away. And then when discouragement results in depression that leads into despair, then you wind up considering the possibility of death. Because maybe that's my only way out. Now, last time we saw Elijah, he's rolling nice. Last time we saw Elijah, it closes chapter 18 by saying the hand of the Lord was on him. I mean, he's run 15 miles nonstop at lightning speed because the hand of the Lord was on him. He's then sucked down rain from heaven because the Lord was on him. He's destroyed 400 prophets because the hand of the Lord was on him. Here is a prophet on steroids. He's got it going on and he is doing large. But in less than 24 hours, his world changes, his life collapses, and in less than a day, everything is turned around and he has gone from the hilltop, the mountain peak of victory, to the valley of despair. And many of us knows that sometimes it doesn't take 24 hours for things to turn on you. A diagnosis or a physical ailment that you didn't even know was operating within your body. In less than 24 hours, your need for a miracle has now dumped in your head. And there is a need for a supernatural intervention into your emotional stability and well-being. That's our situation with Elijah. He's going to find himself where many of us have often found ourselves, in a black hole. He's going to find himself looking for a light at the end of the tunnel, only to discover it's the light of an oncoming train. Because his whole world is going to be turned upside down in a day. When we come to chapter 19, we find out what led to this emergency shift in his emotions. You see, he had an expectation, because when we finished chapter 18, he had told Ahab, cheer up, laugh, party, eat, and drink, because it's going to rain. And Ahab got in the chariot and made his way home. Elijah beat him home by running. The problem is, Jezebel said, I'm going to send a message to Elijah that if you don't get out of town by tomorrow this time, you're a dead man. Now, Ahab had a controlling wife. He had a woman who was telling him what to do. He had a controlling wife, and this wife had taken over when it was Elijah's anticipation that Ahab was going to turn things around. He didn't know who he was married to. He was married to a lady named Jezebel, and Jezebel was running this show. Jezebel was calling this shot, and Jezebel was telling him, Elijah, you're a dead man. He is now living under a threat. Jezebel, the evil one, has threatened his well-being and his life. And he's trying to figure out now, How is he going to face this? And this is overnight. His whole life has changed because somebody has gotten into his head. So what he does is he goes on another day's journey. The man had run 15 miles. Now he's going to go on a whole nother day's journey. He sits under the juniper tree, verse 4, and he requests for himself that he might die. It is enough now, O Lord, take my life, for I am not better than my fathers. He wants to die 24 hours after the biggest miracle he's seen. This is a fast, slippery slope. Okay, watch this now. Elijah is not a carnal Christian. Elijah is not an unspiritual person. He's been called a man of God. We just saw the hand of the Lord was on him. So guess what? It's possible for spiritual people to get depressed. In fact, all through the Bible, spiritual people got depressed. So you can be spiritual and be down. You can be spiritual and be emotionally struggling through something. So don't automatically feel that your discouragement is due to your carnality. Now, if you are carnal and if you are spiritual, then it could very well be related to that. But it's not automatically related to that, specifically in the life of someone who is pursuing God. So he's ready to give up. He's ready to throw in the towel. And when he's ready to throw in the towel, he lays down because he's so tired under a juniper tree, which is only a tree big enough for one person to lay under it. And there was an angel touching him and said, arise, eat, verse 5. He looked up, and behold, there at his head a bread cake baked on hot stones, a jar of water, so that he ate and drank and lay down again. I want to address two things. Number one, I want to address when he got the supernatural. Watch this. When did the angel show up? The angel only showed up after Elijah had had an honest conversation with God. You see, he told God, I want to die. He told God, I'm not good as my fathers. He told God, I have nothing left. He told God, I'm done. And God sent an angel. The reason why a lot of us don't get our angels is because we're not honest with God. We play church, play religion, and certainly play prayer. He wants some truth-telling prayers, some honest prayers. Now, you got to do it respectfully. But he still wants the real thing because he knows what you're going through. The scripture says he knows we're of flesh. So Elijah comes and he bears his soul to God. Because look, when you're ready to die, there ain't no time to be cute. When you so low you want to throw in the towel, that's not the time to play church. That's not the time to just go through religious activity. He gets raw with God. Second thing I want you to notice is how God addressed him. The first need he addressed was his physical need. Because one of the causes of discouragement, depression, and despair is physical. You know how irritated you get when you're tired? You don't want people talking to you, you don't want the kids talking to you, you don't want your mate talking to you, you don't want nobody bothering you. I'm going to hurt you. Don't mess with me now because I'm tired. He gives him a cake, he gives him water, and he gives him, tells him to rest. Why? Because some causes of discouragement are physical. And unless the physical is addressed, the psychological is going to be off, and the spiritual is going to be off. Because if you're physically off, you don't feel like praying. If you're physically off, you don't feel like relating properly. If you're physically off, we all know what it is. That's why people who have chemical imbalances in their brain don't just need a Bible verse, they need a doctor. Because there is something physically going on that needs to be balanced out. And going to church and prayer has its place, but it doesn't restore naturally and automatically chemical imbalances, because that's physical. If you're hungry James says you don't need just a prayer meeting. You need somebody to make you a ham sandwich when you're hungry, because there is a physical reality going on. So it is quite legitimate to examine whether there are physical causes to your emotional struggles and to have those physical causes addressed. Now, God addressed it supernaturally because he sent an angel. But let me tell you about angels. But notice the angel doesn't come until the communication takes place between Elijah and his God. So God needs honest communication, prayer, but real prayer, not fake prayer, not played prayer, honest prayer. He then dismisses and dispenses the angel in order to provide the physical help that he is needing to deal with his reality of depression that he is going through. Now, if you're here today and you say you don't ever get discouraged, you're lying. Okay? You're lying, because you would have to be a perfect person living in a perfect world not to be discouraged. So he deals with the reality of exhaustion physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so does everybody else.
We'll return for more of today's message right after the special announcement from Dr. Evans.
Hello, folks. We have just finished an exciting project on the life of Elijah. We're learning some key lessons from his life. And we've gathered together some of the folks from our church and national ministry. They're over here behind me. And you can see the excitement that has come from learning these lessons. These are life-transforming principles that I'm sure you and your family and your small group will be excited to become a part of too. You want to get this project on Lessons from the Life of Elijah, because we take the truth from his life, apply it to our lives so that our lives are transformed by that truth. And I'm excited to communicate it. These folks are excited to have received it, and we're excited now to talk about it, fellowship about it, and interact about it, because it is so life transforming. So your small group has a great product now that you can use to grow your community and your faith and your connection with God and one another. So get these lessons on the life of Elijah. I'm sure it will be a life-changing experience for you as well as your friends.
We now return to today's message.
So, the angel of the Lord comes in verse 7 a second time. He's touched by an angel. Arise, eat, because your journey is too great for you. Now watch this. So he lets him rest before he lets him continue. So he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of the food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. That's how you know it's supernatural. Because what he ate lasted him 40 days and 40 nights. See, that ain't normal. You know it's supernatural when you get new strength that goes beyond what you could ever have done on your own, given how you were feeling. It is supernatural when God comes through and when God gives you the ability to keep going when a few minutes ago you were ready to give up. And that's how you know God has shown up in your life. When you're ready to throw in the towel and he brings something in your experience that quickens you, wakes you up so you can get up and keep going. And guess where he told him to go? To the mountain of God. Okay, watch this now. When you are depressed, many times the last place you want to go is to the mountain of God. The mountain of God means to go in God's presence. That's the last place you want to go. But that's the first place God wants you to run to. He wants you to run to his presence and bring your depression with you. Bring your discouragement with you. He'll give you enough to get to the mountain, to get to his presence. So he calls him into his presence. Now it gets really interesting. Now there are a number of issues going on here. He asked him, then it came to a cave, lodged there, verse 9, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here, Elijah? Now we have a lesson in Christian counseling. Okay? God is now taking the form of a counselor, and he says, what are you doing here, Elijah? Whenever I counsel or any one of our counselors counsel, we ask, why are you here? Now, God doesn't have to ask, why are you here, because he doesn't know. Because he knows why you're here. He knows that you've been frustrated. In fact, he just fed you. But he asked him, why are you here? The reason God asked him, why are you here, is not for God to get information. The reason he asked, why are you here, is for him to fully express what he's dealing with. So what are you dealing with, Elijah? And here's what Elijah says. Elijah said, I have been very zealous for the Lord, for the God of hosts, for the sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. Okay, so let's discuss why he's here. Why are you in this situation? Why are you so depressed? Okay, you asked me, God, I'm going to tell you. I committed myself to you. I dedicated myself to you. All them other people are unspiritual. They didn't keep your covenants. They were worshiping those idols. And I'm all here by myself. He has adopted a victim's mentality. He was just victorious with these people. He was just victorious with them making a renewed commitment. But because he was psychologically damaged, he developed a victim's mentality. Elijah was wrong. He says, I'm a victim and I'm all by myself. Okay. So God says, go forth and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and it was a great wind, rending the mountain and breaking it into pieces, the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. There was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Verse 12. He said there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. But after the fire, the sound of a gentle blowing. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in the mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. And behold, a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? That's the same question. So let's follow this. He asks him a question. He gives him a victim's answer. He then gives him all these experiences, but he says, I wasn't in none of them. I was only in the blowing breeze. Don't only look for the supernatural in something extraordinary. The supernatural, that is the voice and presence of God, often shows up in the ordinary. In other words, he wasn't in the fire, he wasn't in the wind, he wasn't in the earthquake, he was in the breeze. He brought him to the mountain of God, into a quiet place of his presence. Because many of us don't hear God because there are too many other voices we're hearing. Too many loud things, the wind, the fire, the earthquake. And he says, no, I'm in the breeze. I'm in the nice, soft thing that you're getting with my presence. Now, why are you here? Well, he says, when he heard it, he wrapped his face. He said in verse 14, he says it again, I'm very jealous for the Lord, but the people have forsaken you. I alone am left. They seek to take my life. So guess what God does? You find at the end of verse 3, it says he left his servant behind. So Elijah is by himself. Because depression gets worse if there's nobody in your life to change your thinking. See, if you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're talking to yourself, that's a bad conversation for yourself. You're already feeling sorry, and there's nobody to talk to but you, about you, regarding you, to tell you what you ought to do, and you aren't in a place to even hear you correctly, and what you are telling you is only related to how you feel, then your discussion with yourself is helping yourself to become worse off about you. So God then enters the picture and tells him, Elijah, tell me how you feel. Stop talking to yourself. Because when you talk to yourself, you were getting depressed, you were suicidal. Start talking to me, okay? Now I'm going to show you the wind and the rain and all that stuff. Now talk to me again. No, Elijah, don't talk to yourself, because you and you aren't getting together with you real good. So y'all talk to me. You, yourself, and I, y'all have a conversation just with me, because you talking to you is killing you. Because whenever you talk to you, you want to kill you. Since I don't want you to kill you, stop talking you to you, and y'all talk to me. I don't know what the heck I just said, but it sounded right. Tell me again. Let me hear it again. Talk to me. I'm the only one left. Now, what depression, discouragement, despair often brings is distorted information. God has to clarify, verse 18, yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Now, what's his complaint? I'm the only one. God says, there's 7,000 folk like you out there. It's just you are so psychologically bent right now, all you see is you. I got 7,000 people you don't even know about who have the same faith, same commitment, same loyalty that you have. So you are wanting to die off of misinformation. You don't have the right information. And so what did God's presence in his counseling session do? Give him new data. And then God closes by doing one other thing for him. And it's a very important thing. In verses 19 through 21, he runs into a man named Elisha. At the end of verse 19 says, and Elisha passed over to him and threw his mantle on him. He left the oxen and ran after Elijah, Elisha does, and please let me kiss my father and my mother, then I will follow you. And he said to him, go back again, for what have I done to you? So he returned from following him, took the pair of oxen, sacrificed them, boiled their flesh with the implements of oxen, and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and followed Elijah and ministered to him. Because sometime when you're discouraged, you need somebody with flesh and blood. Sometimes talking to God, he's a spirit out there. He's real, but he's a spirit out there. So guess what God did? God gave him a friend. God said, look, I'm going to bring somebody in your life who is going to minister to you. Because right now, your ministry has been depleted. And your get up and go is not there. So guess what? Now that I have been counseling with you and you brought me into the equation of your victim's mentality, I got somebody I have already set up to bring into your life to minister, to encourage, to lift you up, and to bring you out of your depression. God has an angel for you. He's got a person for you. He has himself for you. He gave Elijah all three of those to give him a supernatural experience to lift him out of his depression. And one of the reasons that the church exists is to have people available in your life when you are down who can embrace you, minister to you, lift you up, and he can use you to do the same thing for somebody else. Because when we are depressed, we need another perspective. That doesn't deny the reality of how we feel. But what it does is it doesn't let you live there. A father one day was at the zoo with his son, and they were at the lion's cage, and the lion roared, and it terrified the little boy. He took off. The father didn't move. He said, boy, come back here. He said, Daddy, run, the lion, the lion. He said, boy, I said, come back here. He said, Daddy, the lion, the lion. He said, boy, I told you, come back here. He said, but Dad, don't you see the lion? Dad said, no, I'm staring at the cage. When you are discouraged, all you hear is the voice of the lion. You need somebody in your life who can discuss the cage, who can tell you about the bars, who can tell you that lion has got a big mouth, but he ain't going nowhere because he's being held in by something greater. Some of us are being destroyed by Satan. You need somebody who can whisper about the power of God in your life. You chaotic and confusing and difficult and painful. We could have chosen many more. Time will only allow us to address 4 of them. But these 4 mothers share a principle that is a principle applicable to all of us, be we male or female, to any Christian, that is a transforming principle when life has unraveled. The first of the 4 I would like to simply summarize, that's all time will allow us to do, is the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth is about a mother with 2 daughter-in-laws, Naomi, and all 3 ladies are widows. All 3 ladies have lost their husbands. So they are in pain. Here is Naomi, who's now a mother who has lost her 2 sons, her husband, and now she is there with her daughter-in-laws, and a decision has to be made. Things are not working out. So she invites her daughters to go back home. Back home for them was a place called Moab. Go back home that you might perhaps find a husband back home. I can't bear any more children. Even if I could, you couldn't wait for them to get old enough for you to marry them to continue our family line. You couldn't do that. So it's really not practical, daughters, for you to go with me because you're Moabite women. And our Jewish men aren't going to fool with you. You're from Moab. You're part of the enemy. They're not going to connect with you. So go back home. Ruth makes a decision that goes against what is in her personal best interest. She makes a decision to go with Naomi, her mother-in-law, back to Jerusalem, knowing that may quite possibly mean she can never hope to get a husband. She makes a decision in favor of a spiritual reality. My God shall be your God. I'm going to cling to you because I'm going to cling to my faith, even though clinging to my faith doesn't appear to be in my best interest. But she makes a decision to not go with her sister-in-law, to not go with a girlfriend, back to Moab, where it's going to be easy. She decides to hang out with her mother-in-law in Jerusalem, where it's going to be harder. Now, you know the story, and if you don't, then you need to read the book of Ruth. It only has 4 chapters. It won't take that long. Ruth is gleaning in the field. She's gleaning in the field. She's serving her mother-in-law when Boaz sees her. Now, Boaz is a lot older man with a lot more money. He's a very wealthy older man, and he sees Ruth gleaning in the field and wants to know, who is that? Now, she didn't say anything. She wasn't manhunting. She wasn't searching. She wasn't doing any of that. She was just fulfilling her spiritual commitment, and somebody saw her. The net result of it in chapter 4, verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the woman women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him." So we got a mother and daughter scenario here. Naomi is too old to have babies. She's had 2 sons. She's too old to have babies. Neither of her daughter-in-laws have been able to get pregnant. They've not been able to conceive. But now through a series of events where the supernatural enters in, because it says the Lord enabled her to conceive, she now gets pregnant with a son. But that's not the end of the story. Verse 17, the neighbor woman gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. She wasn't able to get pregnant. Things didn't work out the first time around. Her husband died. She made the decision not to go back to the old guys, but to make a spiritual decision to hang out with Naomi, never knowing that God would enter into the picture, raise up a man who was rich and old but not cold. And she got pregnant with Obed, who is the father of Jesse, who is the father of David, through whose lineage comes the Savior, Jesus Christ. If girlfriend would have gone back to Moab, not only would she have had to settle for some jive-time Moabite, she would have missed out on Boaz, which means she would have missed out on Obed, which means she would have missed out on being in the lineage of Jesus Christ. All because she made a decision where she could not see the solution in advance. All she knew was, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. If her sister-in-law would have only seen things through a spiritual eyes and not through what looked practical for the moment, then she could have seen what God could do for her. 1 Samuel chapter 1. Our second mother, Hannah. Hannah is barren. She can't have children. Why couldn't she have children? Verse 5 tells you, but the Lord had closed her womb. The reason why she couldn't get pregnant is that the Lord had blocked the capacity. Not only was this the case, but she was in an unpleasant environment, being made fun of because she couldn't have children. Verse 7, it happened year after year. So she's trying to get pregnant year after year. This is an ongoing attempt to become a mother. And it wasn't working out for her. She was greatly distressed, verse 10, and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. Verse 11, she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you indeed look upon the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and a razor shall not come on his head. She goes before the Lord in a desperate situation. In a situation she could not fix and ask God to reverse the way things had been all of her adult life and inability to get pregnant. What happened? Then they arose, verse 19, early in the morning, and worshiped before the Lord, and returned again to their house in Ramah. And Elkanah had relations with Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Oh, wait a minute now. Why is it important to know the Lord remembered her? Because the Lord had closed up her womb. God had caused the problem. Here's what you have to understand. If God causes the problem, only God can fix the problem. You see, you have to understand that. That's why you have to be in tune spiritually. If God caused the problem, which it says he closed her womb, then only God can reverse the problem. It doesn't matter who you know. It doesn't matter what your name is, how powerful you are, and how much money you have. It says, and God remembered her. How much did he remember her? Chapter 2, verse 21. The Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew up before the Lord. So he not only remembered her with a son, he remembered her with a bunch of sons and 2 daughters when she went years with nothing happening. Now this is all going somewhere. Stick with me. Okay, mother number 3. 1 Kings 17. 1 Kings 17. Verse 8. Then the word of the Lord came to him, Elijah, saying, arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and stay there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. There's a famine in the land. There is food is hard to find. We might call it a recession. The economy was going downhill. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, a widow was there gathering sticks, and he called her and said, please give me a little water in a jar that I may drink. And as she was going to get it, he called her and said, please bring me a piece of bread in your hand. But she said, as the Lord your God lives, I have no bread, only a handful of flour in a bowl and a little oil in the jar. And behold, I am gathering a few sticks that I might go in and prepare for me and my son, so she's a mother, that we might eat it and die. In other words, this is going to be our last meal. This is the Last Supper. We will never eat again. All we're going to do is die. I can't give anything to you because all I've got is the last meal for me and my son. Then Elijah said to her, do not fear. Go do as you have said, but make me a little bread cake from it first and bring it out to me, and afterwards you will make one for yourself and your son. Now I know I love the preacher, but I'm down to my last piece of chicken. I can't be sharing my last meal with you. I just told you, Reverend Elijah, I just told you that I only have enough for me and my son. Now I just told you that. I just have enough for me and my son. But here you preachers go again, asking to be first in Jesus' name, and you're gonna throw God in this and ask to be first, and then tell me we're gonna eat next when I told you there is no next. This is all I have. This is my last dime. This is my last dollar. This is all I've got, and here you want it. Yeah, it got quiet in here. Elijah said, do not fear. Go do as you've said, but make me a little bread cake first. Verse 14, for thus saith the Lord God of Israel, the bowl of flour shall not be exhausted, nor shall the jar of oil be empty until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth. Now, wait a minute, Mr. Elijah. I told you I just have enough flour and oil for one meal. I told you that. You come back and tell me that God told you to tell me that if I reverse my priorities, God is going to supernaturally come into my situation and so flip the script on my burden, problem, death sentence, lack of hope, no future in store for me and my son. He's going to so reverse it that the bowl of flour won't be exhausted and the jar of oil won't be empty until rain, the Lord sends rain on the face of the earth. Is that what you're saying to me? So she went out and did according to the word of Elijah. And she and her household ate for many days. The bowl of flour was not exhausted, nor did the jar of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke through Elijah. If she would have insisted on the Last Supper, if she would have insisted, this is all I have, so I can't do what God told you to tell me to do because it's not practical. Get this now. It's not practical to do that. It doesn't make sense to do that. It is ridiculous for you or God even to ask me to do that. Then it would have been the Last Supper. The fourth one and final widow, before we share our major premise. 2 Kings chapter 4. 2 Kings chapter 4. Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditors have come to take my children to be his slaves. Are you talking about a jacked up situation? This is it. Elisha said to her, what shall I do for you? What shall I do for you? Now, this is an important question. If you come to the prophet for an answer, he may not give you one that you want to hear. He often will not give you one that will work with your natural understanding. Okay, in other words, now, did you come for me to really answer your question? Or did you just need somebody to talk to? Or did you come because you needed a word from heaven? See, a lot of people want to ask questions but don't want to hear a heaven answer. They want to ask a question, but they want an earthly answer that makes sense to them. So before I give you my answer, tell me now, do you really want to hear what I have to say? He goes and gives her a plan. Doesn't make sense. What do you have in your house? Because the creditors are at the door. She said, your maidservant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil. All I've got is a jar of oil. I am not poor, I'm poor. I have a jar of oil. That's all I have. Then he said, go borrow vessels at large for yourself from all your neighbors, even empty vessels. Do not get a few. I want you to go knock on all your neighbors' doors and ask them to give you all the empty stuff in their house that's a vessel or a container. he said, go borrow their vessels. Verse 4, and you shall go in and shut the door, close the door behind you, and you and your sons, and pour out into all the vessels, and you shall set aside what is full. Well, wait a minute. This doesn't make sense. I just told you before we started it, before I came to church, that I just have one jar of oil. You give me some crazy plan that's illogical, doesn't make sense. Get the empty vessels from my neighbors, and don't get a few, get all you can, and then pour my oil into their empty vessels. That doesn't make sense. That's not illogical. What kind of plan is that? So she went from him, shut the door, verse 5, behind her, and her sons. They were bringing the vessels to her, and she poured. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, bring me another vessel. Oh, she in the vessels now. Go, find me something else. And he said to her, there is not one vessel more, and the oil stopped. Now, I don't know if you're following this. The girlfriend has only got one jar of oil. That's all she's got. But what she has is the emptiness of her neighbors. Because she's gone around and collected the emptiness of everybody in her neighborhood. She has now closed the door because God's not going to let non-believers see what he's willing to do through those who have faith. Y'all get locked out. Only the folk who believe get to see this. And she and her sons start pouring not enough. Because all she's got is one jar of oil. She starts pouring the oil. Every single empty vessel that she collected from her neighbor is full. And the oil runs out when the containers run out. In other words, when there's no more emptiness to fill, there is no more divine provision to fill it. God stops working when there's no other place for his work to go. When there's nothing remaining for him to do, he cuts off doing anything, because God will only take you as far as your faith will allow you to go. And so she has one jar of oil, but the oil stops. Watch this now. And she came in and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil, pay your debt, and you and your sons can live on the rest. Now, no, he didn't. I know, I just didn't read that. This started off in verse 1 with Sister Girl not being able to pay her bills. The recession, the depression, the financial situation has messed her up. He says, what do you have in your house? She says, well, actually nothing. Well, except this one jar of oil. That jar of oil in the hands of God is all that you need. Okay? So I need to ask before I go on, anybody here in a crisis? Anybody in a crisis, okay? And if you're not, it's coming. What's the principle? What do these four mothers have in common that is a lesson for all of us here today? As a principle of life, escalated as a principle of crisis. In every single case, and there are many other cases of this in the Bible, but in every single one, in order for their crisis to change, they had to minister to somebody else. Okay, fathers. In order for their crisis to change, they had to make a spiritual decision that was other-oriented. The principle is stated in Luke 6:38. And I'm going to even get more specific with the principle. You know the verse. Everybody quotes the verse because they like the verse, but very few people understand the verse. Luke 6:38. All this is designed for you to learn. Luke 6:38. Here is the principle. Give, and it will be given to you. They will pour into your lap a good measure, pressed down, shaking together, and running over. For by your standard of measure,